Nobody in the Moretti organization ever questioned Luca Moretti twice. Not after what happened to the last man who lied to him. For 15 years, his assistant Daniel had been the one constant beside him. Quiet. Efficient. Loyal. The kind of man who remembered every meeting, every enemy, every secret burial site nobody else was supposed to know existed. Luca trusted him more than blood. Which was exactly why the betrayal cut so deep. That night, Luca wasn't supposed to return to the office. His private jet had already been fueled for Chicago. The security team thought he was gone. But halfway to the airport, Luca remembered the ledger. The black leather ledger Daniel never allowed out of his sight. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous. Personal. So Luca turned the car around without warning anyone. No guards. No announcement. No phone call. And when he quietly opened the office door, he saw a terrified young woman on her knees beside Daniel's desk. Crying. Begging Daniel not to tell him. Not to tell Luca Moretti. And sitting on Daniel's desk was a pregnancy test. Positive. The moment Luca picked it up, everything inside the empire changed. Luca Moretti built fear the same way other men built businesses. Patiently. Ruthlessly. By the age of 38, he controlled half the ports on the eastern coast and enough politicians to make investigations disappear before sunrise. Nobody said his name loudly. Even allies lowered their voices when discussing him. But despite the violence surrounding him, Luca had rules. Never harm children. Never betray family. And never lie directly to him. Daniel Ross knew those rules better than anyone. Because Daniel had spent 15 years standing one step behind Luca through everything: wars, arrests, assassinations, funerals, and silent betrayals. People feared Luca. But they respected Daniel. He wasn't flashy. Didn't wear expensive watches. Didn't walk around with bodyguards trying to impress women. Daniel stayed invisible. That's what made him dangerous. He remembered everything. Every payment. Every enemy. Every weak spot. Luca once said Daniel was the only honest thing left in his life. Which made that office discovery impossible to understand. Luca stared at the pregnancy test in silence while the woman trembled beside the desk. Daniel stood frozen. For the first time in 15 years. Daniel looked afraid. "Explain this," Luca said quietly. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed. The woman quickly wiped tears from her face. She looked barely 24. Office clothes. Smudged mascara. Fear shaking through her entire body. Daniel stepped forward carefully. "Boss, this isn't what you think." Luca slowly turned toward him. "Then tell me what I'm thinking." Silence. Dead silence. The kind that suffocated rooms. Daniel swallowed hard before speaking. "She's my sister." Luca's eyes narrowed instantly. Daniel didn't have a sister. At least not one Luca knew about. And Daniel never hid family. Not from him. The woman quickly shook her head. "He doesn't want you involved," she whispered. "He said if you found out, everything would get worse." Luca's expression darkened. "What gets worse?" The girl looked at Daniel like she was terrified of answering. That was the first moment Luca realized something bigger was happening. Because people feared him. But this woman? She feared somebody else more. Daniel suddenly moved closer. "Boss, please." "Not here." Luca stared at him for several long seconds. Then something strange happened. He noticed blood on Daniel's sleeve. Fresh blood. Not enough for a wound. Enough for violence. Luca immediately grabbed Daniel's wrist. "Whose blood is this?" Daniel tried pulling away. "Wrong move." Within seconds Luca had him slammed against the desk. The woman screamed. Security outside rushed toward the office doors, but Luca raised one hand without looking. Nobody entered. Nobody moved. Luca leaned closer to Daniel. "I gave you 15 years of loyalty," he said softly. "Do not insult me with lies now." Daniel's jaw tightened. Then finally, he whispered 5 words that changed everything. "She's carrying your brother's child." Luca released him instantly. Because his brother was supposed to be dead. 3 years earlier, Matteo Moretti disappeared after a failed arms exchange in Palermo. The official story said rival gangs killed him. No body was ever found. Luca spent millions searching for answers before finally accepting the truth everyone feared to say aloud. Matteo was gone. And Matteo had been chaos in human form. Reckless. Charming. Dangerous with women. Dangerous with money. Dangerous with loyalty. Unlike Luca, Matteo loved attention. Loved clubs. Loved provoking enemies. Half the empire's problems started because Matteo couldn't control himself. But he was still Luca's younger brother. And Luca buried a part of himself the day Matteo disappeared. Now suddenly, a frightened pregnant woman stood in Daniel's office claiming Matteo was alive long enough to father her child. Luca stared at her carefully. "What's your name?" "Sophia." "Full name?" "Sophia Bennett." She answered quickly. Honestly. Daniel finally spoke again. "She worked at the Marseille property 2 years ago. Matteo met her there." Luca remembered immediately. The Marseille villa. One of Matteo's favorite places for disappearing with women. Luca's stomach tightened. "How long have you known?" Daniel hesitated too long. That answer alone told Luca everything. "For months," Luca said coldly. Daniel lowered his eyes. Yes. The betrayal hit harder than expected. Months. Months of hiding this. Months of lying directly to Luca's face. Sophia suddenly stepped forward desperately. "He was trying to protect you." Luca looked at her sharply. "From what?" Her voice cracked. "From the people hunting Matteo." The room went still again. Daniel finally exhaled slowly. "They know about the baby." Luca felt something dangerous settle in his chest. "Who?" Daniel's answer came quietly. "The Volkov family." Luca's eyes hardened instantly. The Volkov syndicate wasn't just another rival organization. They were monsters. Cold-blooded traffickers with political connections stretching through Europe and Russia. Luca had spent years avoiding direct war with them because wars with men like that never ended cleanly. If they were hunting Matteo's child, this wasn't personal anymore. It was strategic. Sophia suddenly broke down crying. "They killed my apartment manager yesterday. They thought he was hiding me." Luca looked toward Daniel. "You hid this from me while they got closer." Daniel nodded once. "I needed proof first." "Proof of what?" Daniel slowly reached inside his jacket. Luca instantly drew his weapon. But Daniel only pulled out an envelope. Old photographs. Burned edges. Luca grabbed them carefully. Then his entire expression changed. Matteo. Alive. Bruised. Terrified. And standing beside armed men Luca recognized immediately. Volkov soldiers. One final photo slipped free from the stack. A date written behind it. 3 weeks ago. Luca's blood turned cold. Because if that picture was recent, then Matteo Moretti wasn't dead. He was being held somewhere alive. And Daniel had known. Luca didn't shoot Daniel. Most men in the organization expected him to. Instead, Luca locked the office doors and poured himself whiskey with shaking hands nobody had seen in years. Because betrayal hurt. But hope. Hope was more dangerous. Especially for a man like Luca. "You're going to tell me everything," he said quietly. Daniel nodded. Then finally began. 3 months earlier, Daniel received an anonymous package at his apartment. No return address. Inside were the photographs and a single note. "He is alive. Don't trust anyone." At first Daniel thought it was bait. But then Sophia appeared. Pregnant. Terrified. Carrying details only Matteo could have known. She explained Matteo had hidden her for months while trying to escape the Volkov organization. He believed someone close to Luca was feeding information to enemies. That was why Matteo never contacted his brother directly. He didn't know who to trust anymore. Not even inside the Moretti empire. Luca listened silently while rage built behind his eyes. "There's a traitor inside my family." Daniel nodded carefully. "Yes. And you decided not to tell me?" "I decided to protect you until I knew who it was." Luca nearly laughed. Protect him? Daniel didn't understand. Luca Moretti survived because he saw danger early. Hiding danger from him was the ultimate betrayal. But deep down, Luca also understood why Daniel did it. If Matteo truly believed someone inside the empire betrayed him, then anyone could be compromised. Drivers, captains, security, even family friends. The room suddenly buzzed. Daniel's phone. One message. His face immediately drained of color. Luca grabbed the device before Daniel could stop him. The message contained only a photo. A sniper scope. Pointed directly at the office building. And beneath it. "We found her." Sophia gasped. Luca moved instantly. He killed the lights, dragged Sophia behind the desk, and pulled Daniel down seconds before glass exploded across the office. Gunshots ripped through the windows. Sophia screamed. Daniel fired back while Luca calmly assessed angles. Professional shooters. Not random killers. Volkov. Luca's expression changed completely. The emotional businessman disappeared. The Mafia boss returned. And that made him terrifying. "Basement exit," Luca ordered. Daniel grabbed Sophia while Luca emptied rounds toward the opposite building. More bullets shattered the walls. Someone outside screamed. Luca didn't look. Didn't care. He moved through smoke and broken glass with terrifying calm while escorting Sophia through hidden corridors beneath the building. She stared at him differently now. Not as a crime boss. As a weapon. When they finally reached the armored vehicles underground, Luca grabbed Sophia's face firmly. "Listen carefully," he said. "From this moment forward, nobody knows where you are except me." Sophia nodded through tears. Luca turned toward Daniel next. And his voice became ice. "If you lie to me again." Daniel finished the sentence himself. "You'll kill me." Luca stared at him for several seconds. Then quietly answered. "No. That would be mercy." Sophia expected Luca Moretti to terrify her. Instead, he confused her. Because beneath the cold violence and terrifying reputation was something she hadn't expected. Control. Absolute control. The safe house Luca moved her into overlooked the ocean far outside the city. Armed guards patrolled every entrance. Nobody spoke unnecessarily. Nobody looked directly at Luca unless invited. Still, Sophia noticed something strange. Luca personally checked every lock himself before sleeping. Like a man who trusted nobody. Not even his own men. Late that night, Luca entered the kitchen to find Sophia awake. She quickly stood. You don't need permission to sit, Luca said. His tone wasn't warm. But it wasn't cruel either. Sofia hesitated before speaking. Matteo talked about you constantly. Luca poured whiskey silently. Mostly insults, she added carefully. A faint smile almost appeared. Almost. That sounds like him. For the first time since arriving, Sofia relaxed slightly. Then Luca asked the question that changed the mood instantly. Did he love you? Sofia looked down. Yes. Luca studied her expression carefully. Real pain. Real grief. Not manipulation. When did you last see him? 7 weeks ago. What happened? Sofia's eyes filled immediately. He gave himself up. Luca froze. She explained Matteo discovered Volkov men tracking Sofia's location. Rather than risk them finding her and the baby, Matteo surrendered himself willingly in exchange for her escape. Luca closed his eyes slowly. Because that sounded exactly like Matteo. Reckless. Emotional. Stupidly loyal to people he loved. Sofia then whispered something unexpected. He thought you hated him. Luca looked up sharply. He said you stopped looking for him. That hit harder than bullets. Because Luca never stopped. Not emotionally. Not privately. But after years with no body and no leads, the organization demanded closure. Publicly, Luca declared Matteo dead to stabilize the empire. Matteo must have heard about it. And believed it. Sofia carefully reached into her pocket. Then handed Luca a small silver lighter. Matteo's lighter. Luca recognized it instantly. Their father gave it to Matteo at 17. Luca's hands tightened around it. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Then Sofia softly said. He wanted your child to know your family wasn't built on monsters. Luca stared at the lighter silently. Because nobody had ever spoken to him that way before. Not enemies. Not women. Not even allies. Monsters. That's what the world called men like Luca Moretti. And maybe they were right. But now. There was a child involved. Matteo's child. Moretti blood. Which meant Luca suddenly had something he never expected to protect. A future. Then the safe house alarms exploded. Red lights flashed instantly. Guards screamed downstairs. Daniel's voice echoed through the security system. Boss, they found us. Luca immediately grabbed his gun. But before leaving, he turned towards Sofia one last time. And for the first time in years. Luca Moretti made a promise. I failed my brother once. His eyes darkened. I won't fail his child. The attack lasted 9 brutal minutes. 9 minutes of gunfire, shattered walls, blood, and screaming men. When it ended, 6 guards were dead. 2 attackers escaped. And Luca finally understood something horrifying. The leak wasn't random. Someone close to him had access to private safe house locations. Only 4 people knew where Sofia had been hidden. Luca. Daniel. Marco. And Elena. Marco had served the Moretti family for 20 years. Elena handled Luca's internal communications personally. Both trusted. Both dangerous if compromised. Luca gathered everyone in the underground security room before sunrise. Nobody sat. Nobody breathed comfortably. Because everyone knew Luca's silence usually came before violence. He placed a bullet on the table. Then calmly said. One person in this room betrayed my family. Nobody moved. Luca looked at Marco first. You've been with me since prison. Marco nodded slowly. Yes, boss. Then Elena. You handled every relocation order personally. Yes. Daniel stayed silent. Luca paced slowly. The Volkov organization knew exact timing. Exact routes. Exact locations. He stopped. That information came from inside. Sweat rolled down Marco's neck. Elena looked terrified. Then suddenly, Daniel stepped forward. "It's me." Everyone froze. Even Luca. Daniel kept his eyes forward. "I leaked information." Sophia gasped. Luca stared at him carefully. "Why?" Daniel's voice cracked for the first time ever. "Because they have my son." The room went dead silent. Daniel explained everything. 8 months earlier, Volkov operatives kidnapped his 17-year-old son in London. They threatened to kill him unless Daniel cooperated slowly from inside the organization. Daniel tried fighting them. Tried stalling. But every refusal came with photographs. Bruises. Broken fingers. Torture. "They made me believe Matteo was already dead," Daniel whispered. Then Sophia appeared and everything became worse. Luca's jaw tightened. Because Daniel wasn't evil. He was desperate. That made this harder. Marco suddenly exploded. "You sold us out." Daniel screamed back instantly. "They were torturing my child." Silence crashed through the room again. Luca finally stepped closer to Daniel. "Where is your son?" Daniel slowly looked up. "Belgrade." Luca's eyes hardened instantly. "Volkov territory. A death sentence." Daniel's voice shook. "I never wanted this." Luca studied him carefully. Then asked the question nobody expected. "If I bring your son home, are you loyal to me again?" Daniel looked stunned. "You'd still trust me?" Luca's answer came cold and simple. "No." A painful pause followed. "But I understand you." That broke Daniel completely. Because mercy from Luca Moretti was rarer than survival. Daniel lowered his head in shame. Then Luca issued the order that changed the war entirely. "Prepare the jet." Marco blinked. "You're going to Belgrade yourself?" Luca loaded his weapon calmly. "They took my brother." Click. "They threatened my bloodline." Click. "And now they touched my family." The room understood instantly. This wasn't business anymore. This was revenge. And revenge made Luca Moretti unstoppable. Belgrade smelled like cold smoke and corruption. Perfect territory for men like Volkov. Luca arrived with only Daniel and 4 trusted soldiers. No massive convoy. No public movement. Visibility got people killed in cities like this. The abandoned hotel where Daniel's son was held overlooked the river like a decaying monument to violence. Luca studied blueprints while Daniel shook quietly beside him. "You still have time to walk away," Luca said. Daniel looked horrified. "After what I did?" "Yes." Daniel's eyes filled with shame. "I don't deserve mercy." Luca reloaded calmly. "No." A long silence passed. "But your son does." That single sentence nearly destroyed Daniel emotionally. Because for the first time in months, someone gave him hope. The operation began at 2:13 a.m. Fast. Silent. Brutal. Luca moved through the hotel corridors like death itself. Guards disappeared before alarms triggered. Daniel watched in stunned silence as Luca eliminated men with terrifying precision. This wasn't rage anymore. This was experience. Years of survival condensed into violence. Then they reached room 417. Inside sat Daniel's son. Alive. Barely conscious. Bruised beyond recognition. Daniel collapsed beside him immediately. Tears streaming uncontrollably. Luca turned away respectfully. Then the lights died. A slow clap echoed from the hallway. Volkov himself stepped forward smiling. Sergei Volkov. Tall. Elegant. Monster. You finally came personally, Sergei said calmly. Luca raised his weapon instantly. Sergei smiled wider. If you shoot me, your brother dies tonight. Luca's finger tightened on the trigger anyway. Sergei noticed. And laughed. That's the difference between us. You still love people. Luca's eyes became ice. Where is Matteo? Sergei slowly stepped closer. Alive. For now. Daniel grabbed his son while Luca held position. Then Sergei dropped the real bomb. He betrayed you first. Luca's expression didn't move. But internally, everything shifted. Sergei continued carefully. Matteo sold information to us years ago. That's how this began. Daniel looked shocked. Luca stayed silent. Because part of him almost believed it. Matteo had always been reckless. Impulsive. Weak under pressure. Sergei smiled. You built an empire beside a traitor and never noticed. Then suddenly, gunfire erupted upstairs. Marco's voice screamed through comms. Boss. We've been surrounded. Sergei smiled again. You walked directly into my city. Luca slowly lowered his weapon. Then did something terrifying. He smiled back. Good. Sergei's confidence flickered briefly. Because only dangerous men smiled before bloodshed. And Luca Moretti looked ready for war. The warehouse sat beneath the old shipping district. Dark. Frozen. Guarded like a military prison. Luca walked through bodies and blood to reach it. Marco's team created enough chaos outside to buy them minutes, maybe less. Inside the underground cell, Luca finally saw him. Matteo. Alive. Thin. Beaten nearly beyond recognition. But alive. For several seconds Luca couldn't move. Because grief does strange things when it suddenly becomes hope. Matteo slowly lifted his head. Then weakly laughed. Took you long enough. Luca nearly lost control right there. Instead, he cut the chains silently. Matteo collapsed instantly. Years of pride disappeared between them in one moment. You idiot, Luca whispered. Matteo smiled painfully. I knew you'd come. Then footsteps thundered outside. Sergei. Luca handed Matteo a weapon immediately. You can still shoot. Matteo checked the magazine weakly. One eye closed maybe. That almost made Luca laugh. Almost. Then Matteo grabbed his arm. Don't trust Elena. Luca froze. What? She's the leak. Everything suddenly connected. The communications. The relocation timings. The intercepted routes. Elena. Matteo continued quickly. She's been feeding Volkov information for 2 years. Why? Matteo's expression darkened. She thinks you killed her father. Luca remembered instantly. An accountant executed during an internal purge years earlier. Collateral damage. Elena never knew the truth. Volkov used that hatred carefully. Then explosions rocked the warehouse. Too close. Luca grabbed Matteo immediately. We move now. But Matteo suddenly stopped him. There's something else. Luca turned sharply. Matteo's eyes filled with guilt. Sergei wasn't lying completely. Silence. I did give them information once. Luca stared at him coldly. Matteo continued desperately. I was trying to clear gambling debts. I didn't know how deep it went until it was too late. That confession hurt more than Luca expected. Because betrayal from enemies meant nothing. But betrayal from blood? That stayed forever. Matteo looked destroyed. I'm sorry. Luca said nothing. Outside, bullets ripped through metal walls. Time was gone. Still. Luca couldn't leave without answering. So finally he looked at his younger brother and quietly said, "You were always weak for the wrong people." Matteo lowered his eyes painfully. Luca grabbed him firmly anyway. "But you're still my brother." And together, they walked back into war. Back in New York, Elena already knew everything. Belgrade failed. Matteo survived. And Luca was coming home angry. Very angry. She sat alone in Luca's office staring at the city skyline when Sofia quietly entered. Elena smiled softly. "You should have run while you had the chance." Sofia immediately sensed danger. "You told them where I was." Elena didn't deny it. Instead, she poured wine calmly. "Do you know what men like Luca do to innocent families?" Sofia stayed silent. Elena's voice slowly cracked with buried pain. "My father worked for him 23 years. One accusation and Luca had him executed." Sofia whispered carefully. "Was he innocent?" Elena's silence answered enough. Because deep down, she never actually knew. Hatred simply became easier than truth. Then Luca entered the office unexpectedly. No guards. No warning. Just silence. Elena immediately understood. It was over. Luca closed the door behind him slowly. "You should have disappeared." Elena smiled sadly. "I thought about it." Luca approached carefully. "You endangered a child. You destroyed my father." Luca stopped walking. Then quietly said something shocking. "I didn't order his death." Elena froze. Luca explained the truth. Years earlier, another captain forged evidence against her father during an internal power struggle. By the time Luca discovered the lie, the execution had already happened. Elena's hands began shaking violently. "No." Luca nodded once. "I kept paying your mother anonymously after it happened." Elena looked like her entire world shattered. Because revenge had been the only thing keeping her alive. And now revenge meant nothing. Tears filled her eyes instantly. "Sergei lied to me." Yes. The realization destroyed her emotionally. Sofia watched silently while Elena collapsed into grief. Then Luca did something nobody expected. He handed Elena a gun. "One bullet," he said quietly. "Your choice." Elena stared at the weapon trembling uncontrollably. Shoot Luca. Or herself. The room became suffocating. Then slowly, Elena placed the gun back on the desk. And whispered. "I'm tired." Luca nodded once. So was he. Sergei Volkov came to New York personally. That alone terrified everyone. Because men like Sergei never entered enemy territory unless absolutely necessary. Or absolutely confident. The abandoned harbor became the battlefield before sunrise. Fog covered the water while Luca's men positioned themselves silently across shipping containers and rooftops. This wasn't business anymore. This was survival. Matteo stood beside Luca loading weapons carefully. "You still mad at me?" Luca answered honestly. "Yes." Matteo laughed weakly. "Fair." Then black SUVs rolled into the harbor. Volkov. Dozens. Heavily armed. Sergei stepped out calmly like he already owned the city. "Last chance," he called out. "Give me the girl and the child." Luca walked forward alone. "No." Sergei sighed. "Then everyone dies because of your pride." Luca's eyes darkened instantly. "No." He chambered around. They die because of yours. Gunfire exploded instantly. The harbor transformed into chaos. Men screamed. Containers erupted with bullets. Smoke swallowed everything. Matteo fought beside Luca like old times, reckless but fearless. For a moment it almost felt like brothers again. Then Matteo suddenly froze. A sniper laser. Directly on Luca's chest. Without hesitation Matteo shoved Luca sideways. The shot hit Matteo instead. Everything stopped. Luca caught his brother before he hit the ground. Blood poured instantly. Matteo tried smiling through pain. Told you. Cough. I'd make up for it. Luca's entire face changed. Not rage. Not violence. Pain. Real pain. The kind powerful men hide until it destroys them. Then Sergei appeared through the smoke aiming directly at Luca. Wrong decision. Luca stood slowly. Covered in his brother's blood. And for the first time ever. Sergei Volkov looked afraid. The fight ended 30 seconds later. Because grieving men become monsters. And Luca Moretti had nothing left to lose. 3 months later, the Moretti Empire became quieter. Cleaner. Different. Sergei Volkov was dead. Most of his network collapsed afterward. Elena disappeared voluntarily into witness protection overseas. Daniel retired after recovering his son. And Matteo. Matteo Moretti was buried beside their mother overlooking the ocean. Luca visited alone every Sunday. Always silently. Always carrying whiskey. But the biggest change wasn't the empire. It was Luca himself. Because the night he checked on Daniel unexpectedly. He thought he'd uncover betrayal. Instead, he uncovered what remained of his humanity. Sophia gave birth during winter. A boy. Dark-haired. Loud. Healthy. Luca held the child awkwardly the first time, like he was holding something fragile enough to destroy him emotionally. Sophia smiled softly. He has Matteo's eyes. Luca looked away immediately. Because she was right. The baby grabbed Luca's finger tightly. And something inside the feared Mafia boss quietly broke apart. Not weakness. Something rarer. Love. Weeks later, Luca stood in his office staring at the city while Marco approached carefully. The council wants to know your next move. Luca looked at the skyline silently. For years his empire survived through fear. Blood. Control. But now there was a child in the family. A future. Luca finally answered quietly. We build something cleaner. Marco nearly looked shocked. And the enemies? Luca's expression became deadly calm again. They still disappear. Some things never changed. But one thing did. That office door. The same office where Luca found Sophia crying beside Daniel's desk. He never replaced it. Because every time he looked at it, he remembered the night his life split in two. The night he discovered his brother was alive. The night betrayal exposed hidden loyalty. The night fear became family again. All because a Mafia boss checked on his assistant unannounced. And what he found changed everything. Power built Luca Moretti's empire. But loss revealed the man beneath it. For years, Luca believed loyalty meant obedience. Silence. Fear. But the moment he walked into Daniel's office unexpectedly, he discovered something deeper than betrayal. He discovered desperation. Love. Sacrifice. And the terrifying cost of protecting family in a world built on violence. Daniel betrayed him to save his son. Matteo betrayed him because weakness consumed him. Elena betrayed him because grief blinded her. Yet every betrayal carried pain behind it. That realization changed Luca more than war ever could. Because for the first time, he understood that monsters weren't born from evil alone. Sometimes they were created by fear. By loss. By survival. The Empire still feared Luca Moretti after the Volkov War. Maybe even more. But the people closest to him saw something different afterward. A man trying in his own dangerous way to become better before the next generation inherited his darkness. And every Sunday morning, when Luca visited Matteo's grave carrying 2 glasses of whiskey instead of 1, the guards always noticed the same thing. The most feared mafia boss in New York no longer looked angry. He looked tired. Like a man finally learning that revenge could win wars. But only love could leave a legacy.